The ice storm of 24 was a disruption for lots of us. Being stuck at home was a bummer. For some, the feeling of isolation was really hard. But do you know what I heard at least a little bit? I heard it was kind of nice to have a break. Now, I know parents of school-age children were not all saying it's nice, but a lot of folks were. People played board games, enjoyed their pets, avoided traffic, caught up on their reading. Lots of us, it seems, would like to slow down. We just don't know how or if we should. Welcome to TV, Tennessee Valley Church. Today, we're continuing our walk through the Ten Commandments, and today we're talking about the fourth commandment. God, who has our best interests at heart, says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Originally, by the way, the Sabbath was Saturday. That's still the day of worship for our Jewish friends and our Seventh-day Adventist friends. But in New Testament times, Christians began to meet for worship mainly on Sundays to celebrate the day on which Jesus was resurrected. Within a century or so after the life of Jesus, Sunday had become the primary day of Christian worship. So for most Christians, Sunday is our Sabbath. All that to say, the day of the week itself is not something we should get too tied up in knots about. As it turns out, knowing how to keep this commandment isn't easy. God said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And people soon began to ask, what are the do's and don'ts of the Sabbath? So religious scholars over the centuries after Moses came up with hundreds of things that a person could not do on the Sabbath. For most of us, our problem is not being too strict about the Sabbath. Our bigger problem is an unhealthy neglect of the Sabbath. I grew up with blue laws against businesses opening up on Sundays. I grew up with relaxing Sunday afternoon drives in the countryside. Boy, have things changed. In a production-crazy culture like ours, the tendency is to not want to have a Sabbath at all. And it's not good for us. Our spiritual health is suffering. There are two functions of the Sabbath. The first is rest. That word Sabbath, the Hebrew Shabbat, means ceasing, cessation. That break from our busyness, that halt from our hurry, that relaxing from our rush is a gift from God. But lots of us fight rest like a 2-year-old fights a nap. Oh, there might be a few lazy folks among us who need to be encouraged to work. Most of us, though, probably need to be encouraged to rest, to slow down. Many of us are fried, frayed, and frazzled, out of gas, out of time, out of sorts, washed out, wiped out, and worn out, so hurried we haven't smelt a rose in a long time. If we don't take advantage of the gift of rest, we'll suffer physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual consequences. One of my close seminary friends seemed to have limitless energy. He was a husband and father of 3 boys and a full-time student. He served a church as part-time pastor, and he worked about 20 hours a week at a downtown bank. I remember clearly his saying to me one time, I believe God has given me an unusual ability to sleep only a few hours and still accomplish many tasks. Then one Saturday night, he ended up in a Louisville, Kentucky emergency room. Diagnosis? Exhaustion. We need our rest, downtime, relaxed time, chill time, laid back time, Hakuna Matata time. Of course, there are inevitably hectic schedules of life and unavoidably demanding stretches of the road, like the husband, wife, father, or mother who has gone back to school and is working too. The accountant for whom tax season is a blur. The student who's trying to get through finals. The one who has children who can't yet drive and aging parents who can no longer drive. The single parent whose kids are at an age when they demand a lot of attention. There are seasons of life when a nonstop schedule is inevitable, but you can't live all of life like that. My friend Bruce Bass runs a crane company in Richmond, Virginia. In 2003, Hurricane Isabel blew through Richmond, and because the hurricane toppled thousands of trees, there was a heavy demand for cranes afterwards. A few months after the hurricane, I asked Bruce if he'd gotten caught up. Finally, he said, but now we are concentrating on maintenance. They had been working almost round the clock to clean up the massive damage after the hurricane. The community needed those cranes. But after all that, their cranes needed some downtime to be cared for. Non-stop work is too much of a drain and strain on a crane. The same is also true of you. Like those cranes, sometimes responsibilities demand that we work a hectic schedule for a while, and even days off are a luxury we can't afford during those crunch times. But we have to build in time for breaks. Many of us go and go until we either crack up, break down, cave in, or burn out. What is your Sabbath? What is that time when you unwind? If you don't have a Sabbath built into your schedule, then you're probably going to wear out too quickly. But do we have to observe Sunday, that particular day of the week, strictly? What if you have work responsibilities on Sundays? What if you have to spend part of your Sundays driving your kids around? What if you have a big homework assignment due at school on Monday? Do we have to just shut down on Sundays after church? I don't think so. This isn't Sinai 1500 BC, and it isn't Mayberry 1950 either. Our schedules are more hectic. So how do we practice a Sabbath in a frenzied, nonstop culture like ours? I think we can get some help from the way Jesus practiced the Sabbath. Jesus practiced creative Sabbaths. He often pulled away alone to rest and regroup, but He wasn't as strict about the day itself as others were. The Sabbath was created for humans, Jesus said. Humans weren't created for the Sabbath. Sabbath rest is a gift to us. If I were to say, give you a gift certificate for a meal, say at Ruth's Chris, I wouldn't be hung up on which night you go or what you wear or whether you order steak or chicken. But if I were to ask you, how did you enjoy Ruth's Chris? And you responded, we decided we didn't have time to go, so we threw the gift certificate away. Well, then I might be disappointed. The only way to misuse that gift would be not to use it. The same is true of God's gift of the Sabbath. The only way to misuse it is to not use it. If you can't shut down completely on Sundays, take creative Sabbaths. Take a long walk, take a power nap, turn your phone off, take a week, take a day. The basic point is that you need downtime. You need sacred space. You need a day or a couple of half days or 3 1/3 days when you're Sabbathing. You need Sabbath time. Look for hobbies and diversions that break your routine. Work in the yard or the wood shop, paint, sculpt. Find whatever is recreation for you. Sabbath. The first function of the Sabbath is rest. The second is worship. God told us to keep the Sabbath day holy. Holy means set apart, and worship on the Sabbath means coming apart from the mundane, the roles, relationships, and routines of the commonplace, to worship. Reggie McNeil wrote, "Sabbath is the date night of our marriage with God." A date night is when two people who once stood and said vows to each other get together and remember why they did that. They remember what drew them to each other, and the flame is fanned a bit. Sabbath is like that between us and God. We remember why we signed up to begin with. We tell Him how wonderful He is. We take spiritual inventory. We get renewed, recharged, restored. We come together to remember we're not in this alone. We sing, we pray, we study, and we have a date night of sorts with God. Hebrews 10:25 says, "Don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together." That is a mandate not to abandon the discipline of corporate worship. Let's talk just for a moment about worshiping in person as opposed to watching TV church. That you are sitting in front of a computer or a television or holding your phone and watching this program is a real honor for us. We work hard to make this as engaging as we can. And yet we simply cannot duplicate the meaning and experience that come from people being together in person. Recently, I heard someone say that watching worship on TV versus being in person is a bit like watching the video of a fireplace on your TV screen, which we do at our house sometimes, versus the warmth of a real fireplace. Some of you are simply not able to worship in person. I understand that. And I'm so glad you have this and other opportunities to worship virtually. But if you are able to get out and join others in worship, I hope you'll consider finding a church where you can feel at home and experience the warmth, the energy, the fellowship, the encouragement that can come only when we are in the same room week after week with fellow pilgrims on the journey. So maybe record TV Church and find a place to worship in person. In a few minutes, I'll be back to talk about the last lighthouse keeper in America and what that has to do with your well-being.
Keeping the Sabbath holy in this modern world we live in can be a real challenge. Pam Nicastro joins us for Tennessee Valley Church today, and Pam is a realtor here in the Huntsville, Tennessee Valley area.
That's right.
Pam, you found a creative way to keep the Sabbath holy for your family.
Yes, I'm a real estate agent, have been for 23 years, and if you've been involved in a real estate transaction, you know that's 24/7. And so for many of those early years, especially when my children were young, it was kind of a 24/7 thing. And I had a hard time finding a day off, period. So my husband and I began to discuss that. I had a lot of complaints from my kids too, which motivated me.
And tell us what you did.
So we instituted kind of a 24-hour Saturday noon to Sunday noon is my time for faith and family. So it's become a lot easier now because on the front end, when I meet a client, I tell them my business hours, and I say, you know, I work 7 days a week, but from Saturday noon to Sunday noon, I take off for faith and family. And one of the things that I've enjoyed about that is it's allowed me to express to my clients that faith's an important thing to me. I think Travis sometimes says, put the ball in play, right? Try to open a conversation. So it's actually allowed me an ability to talk to clients about my faith and ask them questions that, is faith something important to you? So by keeping the Sabbath holy, and that being my intention, my husband Norm and I have found great conversations. I think it's kind of funny, in the corporate world we talk about work-life balance, and like they've thought that idea up, right? I mean, God's the one that thought that up, work-life balance, and has told us to rest. And when I think about my regrets over the last 23 years of work in real estate, it's when I chose work over a family event or over something during that Sabbath time. But I don't regret any business I've lost or, time in real estate. I feel like God has really honored that commitment. And I find that once I explain it to our clients, they really get it and respect it, and kind of causes them to say, well, what's my time of rest? Now it's a little easier. Our kids are grown and gone, so it's easier for us to have that rhythm. And it's my intention, and it is not perfect. In fact, I always tell my clients, if I'm negotiating a contract, all bets are off. Jesus is okay with that, So, but that's our intention, to carve out that time and honor that time.
And as Travis is talking about today, it doesn't have to be perfect because we're not perfect.
Right.
But if we make an attempt to have that time to rest and refocus, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
And what did this mean to your children?
Growing up, I was home a lot because in real estate you can work a lot from home, but they would still say I was distracted and not really there, not really present. And so for them, it was like, okay, Mom and Dad are really going to carve out that time and not be on the phone, or try not to be on the phone, not be tied to the computer. So it was a time of, again, making them a priority, and family time as well as church. Really, by the time we kind of started that 24-hour Saturday to Sunday thing, they were mostly grown, so they didn't really want to be around us anyway. But I think even now they can appreciate that, and hopefully we're modeling that for them. Hopefully.
Well, Pam, thank you for sharing your story.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I think when our children are grown, we can look back and see things we could have done better,
right,
could have done differently.
Right.
But it's never too late to start.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It doesn't have to be perfect.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We're talking about the fourth commandment, to take seriously the Sabbath with its rest and worship. And if we will take this commandment seriously, we'll have a lot more to offer the people who really need us. The last day of 2023 was the last day of the only remaining lighthouse keeper in the U.S. Sally Snowman retired in December from her post looking after a lighthouse in Boston Harbor. Lighthouses are now run by automation, But there was a day when every lighthouse along dangerous coastlines was maintained by a real live person, the lighthouse keeper. Hear this story about one of them. A certain lighthouse keeper was given a specific, limited amount of fuel each month with which to fuel the light, the beacon of the lighthouse. He had to make sure the fuel lasted, and the only way to do that was to use that fuel carefully. But one day a fisherman ran out of fuel in his boat nearby and asked for just a little fuel from the lighthouse keeper. The lighthouse keeper was a nice man, so he complied and shared a bit of fuel. Then a sport boat came by full of tourists, and the captain had not planned well, so he ran out of fuel. The lighthouse keeper shared some of his fuel for the sport boat. A few days later, a party boat came by full of partiers. The captain of that boat was downright irresponsible and had not fueled up his boat, so they ran out near the lighthouse. Of course, the accommodating lighthouse keeper gave them some of his fuel. Then, on a dark and stormy night, ships needed the guiding light of the beacon in the lighthouse. The winds were fierce and the rocks were deadly. But the keeper had run out of fuel. The beacon was dark. Ships were wrecked and lives were lost, for the fuel was gone. Lots of folks and lots of demands tug on you, I know. But those people closest to you, well, they're the ones who really need you. So you need to worship. You need to rest. You need to Sabbath. Lots of good people are counting on you. Don't run out of fuel.
We hope you're enjoying TV Church, and we have a request for you. Would you consider hosting a group of friends in your home to watch TV Church together? You could serve snacks or have people bring elements of a meal to eat together. You could gather and watch live at 10 a.m. Sunday mornings on Way TV, Or you could record it on TV and watch it together anytime. You could watch together from your computer at tvchurch.online anytime. You don't have to be some kind of expert. You just need to like people. And on top of that, you can invite people you like. People you like who are not part of a church family. We at TV Church would provide you suggested discussion questions. So you could watch together, discuss what you've seen, and then maybe eat together. Or you could snack as you watch. There will be no obligation to First Baptist Church of Huntsville. We produce TV Church, but you don't have to be a part of us to host this in your home. This is just an effort to take the church with a capital C where people are. You could be a part of someone's significant, holistic, eternal transformation right there in your home. Would you be willing to consider being a host? Email Pastor Travis at travis@fbchsv.org. He will get you on the email list to receive discussion questions for the week. Would you consider that?